But first, 8 states are holding primaries on Tuesday. Tonight, we're going to preview 2 of them. We'll get reports in a moment from California and from Iowa. We start, though, with a big picture look at the battle for control of Congress. Our Anthony Salvanto is here. He's CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Elaine.
So your model estimates that if the elections were held today, Democrats would have the chance to make the House a toss-up. Now, if Democrats do gain a slim majority, would that constitute the kind of blue wave that some people have predicted?
I think we see the House as a toss-up right now. That would be Democratic gains. And what's important is that coming out of the last year, where we've seen Democrats overperform in a lot of special elections, there's been a lot of talk about, well, can they scale that up? Can they swing enough districts to take back control of the House? Well, the House is a toss-up as it stands right now. That represents some gains, but it also represents the fact that Republicans could well hold on to this, even narrowly. Typically, the party out of power does gain some seats, but it all comes down to this. It's not a national election, right? It's 435 districts that are up. And out of those, we can identify right now 50 to 60 that we think are going to be really competitive, or could be as this summer goes along, depending on what happens in the primaries. Well, we concentrated our efforts at surveying them and then doing a model that would show us how many of them each party would be, probably, possibly likely to win if the election were held today. And that's what makes the House a toss-up. But everything people watch as they go forward should concentrate on the number of seats that each party stands to gain. And then we'll watch this as we go forward. I would wager that this will tilt back and forth a little bit as some of these districts come in and out of play. That's what makes it exciting to watch.
Well, what is motivating voters from both parties as they prepare to cast midterm ballots?
Well, a lot of what's behind this is, number one, a lot of people in these districts say they don't yet feel the effects of what the Republican Congress has done. So we asked them about tax reform. Has it helped you? And a lot of folks say, well, we don't feel it yet. The ones who have tend to be more upper income, but the ones middle income and lower income are less likely to say that they felt it. Same thing with changes to health care. So if you're the Republican Congress arguing for another 2 years, that's a bit of a barrier, and it's something to watch, I think, as they go forward. Can they make that argument in some of these districts? I should add that a lot of these places are, on average, more affluent districts than the nation as a whole, than other districts in the nation. And they're the kind of suburban places that aren't filled up with Trump voters, the Trump base, and they aren't filled up with a Democratic base either. They're not in cities, and they're in suburban areas, nearby cities. They're in New York, they're in Texas, around Dallas, maybe Houston. They're in Southern California, and we'll get to that in a moment. But that's the landscape of places that we think are going to sort of decide all of this.
Well, there's polling also showing a split by gender, which is so interesting. I mean, what are we seeing on that? And what is the significance of that in a year when we are seeing this surge of women candidates?
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that split, these double-digit gender gaps in preference where Democrats were getting the votes of more women, but then men marginally were going for Republicans. And that's something that in these districts, if we were to compare that to the rest of the nation, we don't often see gender gaps that high. We started to see one. We thought we might see a bigger one in 2016, but we didn't, at least not compared to what this looks like. And so we'll see if that holds up. But that's one of the things, but it also underscores a couple of things. You point out the number of women candidates who are running. Well, for Democrats, that seems to be a big factor. When we ask people, does it matter if you vote for a man or for a woman? Now, most people say it doesn't matter, and policy matters. Okay. But for those who do have a preference, they would prefer to vote for a woman instead of a man, and that's particularly true of Democrats and Democratic women. So it could be that what you start to see play out in the primaries is that advantage if Democrats then go and select women candidates, as you mentioned. They've been doing so far.
Well, as we talked about earlier, California is going to be holding primaries Tuesday. Can you put into context how the Democratic efforts there have factored into this pursuit of the House?
Yeah. California is key. Now, it's a blue state. We don't often think of, California being a battleground. But in most states, including blue ones, there are pockets or large swaths of Republican areas. those are places that the Democrats have seen possibly trending towards them over time. There's been demographic change, an influx of Hispanic voters who trend Democratic, younger people buying into suburbs that used to be reliably Republican bastions. Then you've got also people have left the state, moved out, some new folks have moved in. All of those changes in places, especially in Southern California, make this look like they could possibly be in play. Also, of course, the more obvious, that some of them voted for Hillary Clinton. Right. That's one of the, the leading indicators. Well, what happens is, in this chase for the 218, the number that you need to control the majority, there are, I think, about 7 districts in California that the Democrats have their eyes on. Because the House looks like it's such a toss-up, those become critical. So as we watch California and we watch the kinds of candidates that the Democrats pick, you got to say, well, if they can't get good candidates in there, this is going to be determinative, and that's why we watch California so closely.
Fascinating to see how it turns out. Anthony Salvanto, thanks so much.
Thanks.